Yep, already linked.
I say leave it.
Right, good evening, everybody. 7 o'clock, so we'll start. Welcome to the new year and the January meeting of the Development Control Committee. Just got a thing to read out. In accordance with the Openness of Local Bodies Regulations 2014, this meeting is being live streamed and may otherwise be recorded, filmed or communicated on other media platforms. Recording of this meeting will be made available on the Council's YouTube channel shortly after the meeting. Both councillors and officers in attendance are reminded to make full use of and speak clearly into the microphone available at all times. Reminder that mobile phones should be turned off or put on silent mode. Those present at the meeting should refrain from taking telephone calls. Mr. Gill, you have something to say?
Thank you, Chair. Since the last meeting of this committee, there's been a change in the political balance at the authority, with a member leaving the Liberal Democrat Party and joining the Tories. As a consequence, the Conservatives gain an extra seat on this committee and the Liberal Democrats lose a seat. It's been agreed that Councillor Lloyd-Elle will leave the committee in a substantive role. However, this evening she is present as a substitute for Councillor Linda Broadley. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. All right, apologies for absence.
Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Josh Sheen, Councillor Richard Morris, Councillor Frank Broadley, Councillor.
Thank you. Appointment of substitutes apart from Councillor Lloyd-Elle.
None have been received, Chair.
Any declarations of interest? No? Minutes of the previous meeting, may I sign? Thank you.
You can have the last, Chair.
Could I just ask for a nomination for a vice chair, as Councillor Broadley's not here? Councillor Bolter?
Claire, sir.
Everybody agree with that? Thank you. Right, moving on, report of the Planning Policy and Development Manager, application number 22-00392, Eastern Academy Station Road. I'd like to present your report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, this is from previous committee for air source heat pump at Eastern Academy. It's for basically a gas-fired boiler. The school's looking for a more energy efficient solution. Next slide, please. So yes, this is the site. The air source heat pump is going to be on the eastern side of the school grounds, on an area of existing hard standing. To the south is an area of trees, and you've got the playground with the school buildings then to the west and north. To the east, you've got the neighbouring bungalows along the Seaton Road, with the boundary being a mixture of bordered fencing and hedging. Next slide, please. So here we've got a zoomed-in version then of the proposed location of the air source heat pump. It will be surrounded by a timber enclosure. Next slide, please. And here's an overview of the plans. It's not enclosed at the top. This is necessary in order for it to use its air management in order to actually function properly. However, there is a chamfered edge to the timber enclosure, which also provides attenuation for the noise that would be generated from the machine. It'd be 3.8 metres long, 2.2 metres wide and 2.5 metres high. That's the pump itself. And then the timber enclosure, 5.6 metres long, 4.4 metres wide and 2.85 metres high, with an access door that can be fully sealed. Next slide, please. So this shows it, the proposed location in relation to both the school buildings and then the surrounding properties. neighbouring bungalows. 7 objections have been received from neighbouring properties, which are detailed in the officer report. Principally regarding its location, the proximity of the unit to the neighbouring properties and the resulting concerns over noise due to said proximity. Policy 38 of the local plan supports renewable and low carbon schemes. It's subject to then landscape, environmental and amenity considerations. As you saw from the previous slide, the actual unit and enclosure itself is relatively small scale in the context of the surrounding school buildings. It wouldn't be prominent from Seaton Road itself, and given the location in relation to the boundaries of the neighbouring properties, it wouldn't be highly prominent. You would probably just see the very top of the timber enclosure, but not to an extent where it would be overbearing or visually incongruous. I'm taking into account the larger school buildings around it. Next slide, please. So, with regard to the objections, the principle of the noise that will be generated, a noise report has been supplied with the application. It's been undertaken in accordance with the British standards and associated guidance, and it's been carried out on a worst-case scenario basis. So, basically, how noisy would it be in the dead of winter when it's running between 8 a.m. And 9 a.m. on school days in order to get the school up to a suitable temperature. Environmental health have assessed both the methodology of the noise report and the subsequent results, and taking into account the distance away of the unit, both from the school buildings and the residential properties, combined with both background noise levels and the attenuation that would be achieved through the timber acoustic fencing. It has been concluded that the noise generated from the unit would not be perceptible, especially from the neighbouring boundaries. This is conditioned, as you'll see in the report. Next slide, please. Sorry, beg your pardon, I was looking at my other screen. There we go. So this is a view from inside the school, the proposed location, just to give you a bit of context in terms of both the size of the proposed site and the surrounding school buildings. Next slide, please. And then the reason for the deferral from last committee was in order for a viability assessment to be undertaken in order to ascertain whether or not there were any alternative locations for the air source heat pump. The agent has undertaken this, and the following slides then show visually the constraints of the school sites and the proposed potential locations that the air source heat pump could be located. So this slide deals with the building and circulation routes, buildings in red, and the circulation routes, so roads, pathways, and the links between the school buildings in purple. Next slide, please. The next one then is the playing fields in blue here, along with the car parking. Playing fields aren't a viable option for heat pump, Sports England, and our policies seek to retain school playing fields and not to there be any loss as a result. So that takes those out of play. Next slide, please. This is then trees and vegetation, so the green areas. Next slide, please. Then this is the proximity of the proposed heat pump to the plant room. So they've got approximately, the school has £35,000 for ancillary works to actually install the heat pump with trenching and pipe work. And given the costs of that, that equates to a distance of 45 metres from the existing plant room. With this showing then the potential limits of where it could potentially be located. In addition to that, it also looks at the efficiency that will be lost. The further away it gets from the plant room, the greater pump pressure is required, and also you lose a certain amount of energy as a result, the further away you are. And the next slide then shows that just zoomed in a bit more, so you can see the proposed pump room there at the centre, and the proposed location of the heat pump, which is right on that 45 metre boundary distance. Next slide, please. That's then what they're proposing, that the actual route to the pump room from the proposed location would be. Next slide, please. This one then is the noise impacts. So in yellow, we have the residential boundary buffer zone that we needed in order to achieve an acceptable noise level. The red boundary around the school buildings then is the same constraints, but for schools they have a slightly higher threshold of noise rating. So that's those in red. Next slide, please. So by putting all those previous plans together, you're then left with 3 potential sites that don't, then aren't constrained by any of those other areas. Site 1, location 1 rather, in the middle there. In fact, if I go to the next slide, I can show you better. Okay, yeah. Okay, so location 1 is within a schoolyard. It's been discounted due to its size and shape, but also it's stepped. There's a step there, which then makes it very difficult to actually fit it on. And then principally, which is on the wrong side of the building where the pump room is, which means any piping would actually have to physically go through the building, which is impractical. Proposed site number 2 then has been discounted due to its size and also that it's on a thoroughfare between the school playground that you can see there, which leaves plot number 3, or site number 3 rather, which has existing hard standing that can be utilised. It's not going to be impacted by any thoroughfares. It's an acceptable distance away, both to the buildings and the residential properties. So, given the viability assessment that's been supplied by the applicant combined with the noise reports, it is considered that the proposal is sustainable development, would not have a detrimental impact upon the residential amenity of the neighbouring properties or upon the school itself, and would be a renewable scheme that would be in compliance with policy 38 of the local plan. On that basis, it is recommended for approval, subject to conditions. Thank you.
Councillor Lloyd.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I don't know whether I'm Councillor Lloyd or Councillor Broadley at the moment. I'm not quite sure over that. So I'll speak in my own right. First of all, thank you very much to the officer for going to such great lengths to get this sorted and for a very clear explanation of what has happened here. This, Chair, I believe, and I'll be corrected by the officers if I'm wrong, it's the first one of its kind in the borough. Is that correct?
It's the first one that I suppose that's come to us in terms of decided as an application, yes.
Thank you. Therefore, this will be a learning curve for this committee and for our officers. I'm quite certain that they're fully experienced in what they're doing, but it's going to be a learning curve for us. Unfortunately, some of our residents are on the tail end of that learning curve. So I am hoping that this report has got it spot on. It's still, however, on page 10, suggests that there is a possible problem with noise. It has been conditioned, and I'm thankful for that, because that gives the residents some form of protection, and I sincerely hope that that condition is put into the application and not somehow lost along the way. But if this goes ahead, and I cannot now come up with any reason, you may do, Chair, but I can't come up with any reason that this can be refused. I would like to know and be reassured that residents are going to have a fallback position if there is a problem that arises with noise. So that's my first thing. Secondly, I would like to suggest from your diagram on page 7, your picture on page 7, that we could still ask for some planting, substantial tree planting to go on that green part there. I know we were told at the last meeting that trees won't necessarily prevent any noise, and I'm hoping that they're sincerely not going to be. But the trees do absorb sound, and substantial planting on that area, 2 or 3 trees, would help. And I don't know whether I can make that a condition, Chair, or whether we make it a note to the applicant. So those 2 things, I'd like reassurance for the residents, I'd like tree planting, if that's at all possible. And also, finally, if this does go ahead, if there is an issue after this has been erected, what come back and how will residents come back to this council for support? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think I'll answer some of those. I think you will have possibly noted me keep looking at my phone, because I'm actually monitoring the decibel levels within this room. And I think a little bit of a reassurance, the decibel levels within this room are averaging 54 decibels. I'm obviously doing a little bit of swatting up on this as well. 5 decibels is the level of breathing. 10 decibels is the level of a refrigerator. Okay. So, with regard to your suggestion of the condition being in there, my problem is with that is that there's no level that the officers can determine anything against. So, personally, I don't like that particular condition. If this committee is like, if this committee is minded to approve this, I would like an additional condition to be put in. And I will word it exactly as the noise assessment officer or contractor that the academy actually employed suggested in his noise assessment report. And as it would be that condition, it would be totally acceptable and it couldn't be challenged. And it basically reads, the plant noise shall be limited to 0 decibels above background levels at the residential garden boundary, the fences, during night time, 10:30 p.m. till 7:30 in the morning, and less than 5 decibels above typical background levels during daytime when activity is low in the school premises. Plant noise shall be limited to 0 decibels above typical background levels at the nearest dwelling facades, that's the windows, during daytime and nighttime. The JRA noise report shall be used as a basis for noise mitigation. That condition is what was suggested by the actual applicant themselves. And I think it's quite robust. And it does give the officers and the residents something to level and measure against. And basically says the maximum that could go above during low levels within the school is 5 decibels, which is the level of breathing. Which basically states that you will not hear any noise, which is my concern. Okay? If we do put a substantial condition in like that, I think that will be quite robust. With regarding to your trees, yes, that's fine, but that, I've been advised, would have to be a note to an applicant, which can be done.
And can I just come back on
Can Mr Gill wants to say a word?
Thank you, Chair. And in terms of the point that you made, Councillor Loisel, about how this would be enforced, you have two options there. Firstly, you've got the condition, and if the condition is breached, because we now have a figure in that, it's easily measurable by small devices like that, so we could quickly establish whether or not there was a breach. The other thing is, if it became a major problem in terms of noise, which I don't anticipate, and it was to be determined as a statutory nuisance, then there's another course of action through environmental health. So there are two very robust methods of ensuring that this condition is complied with.
Also, I will reiterate, for the benefit of everybody here, if the committee is minded to refuse this, it has to be on planning grounds. You did say that I may be able to think of some, and yes, I could, but I don't know whether they'd be robust enough. And if we did refuse it, it is highly likely to go to appeal. And if it goes to appeal, that will be judged by one person who does not know this area. And if they are minded to approve it, they could very easily approve it without any conditions. So there would be no limitations to noise levels and no possibility of enforcement. Mr Gill?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, you're quite correct. The starting point is, when you're looking at a planning application, conditions. If there is an issue with a planning application, you must start by looking to see whether or not you can remove the issue by using conditions. And on this point, we have a very robust condition. So if you were minded to refuse it and it went to appeal, I have no doubt that the inspector would consider that that decision was unreasonable on the basis that you could have made the application acceptable by imposing the condition that the chair has suggested.
Anyone come back?
Chair, you've made it quite clear, and as long as the legal department are happy with your recommendation, I'm more than happy to support that recommendation and move to permit, because you're quite right, Chair. I've seen things that have gone to inspectors and they've removed all the conditions, and they've made it much worse for the resident. So I think this is the best way forward. Ideally, the best way forward would be to have had it moved right to the other side of the... But as you're saying, Chair, to go through buildings and to go through walkways is just financially unviable, not acceptable at all. So I'll second, I'll move the report.
Before we do that, I accept you moving the report.
Okay, I'll remove my removal.
No, that's fine. I just want to make sure that we go through the proper process. I have suggested an additional condition. I need your approval for that condition to go in. So can I have a show of hands to say that that condition is approved to be added? It's unanimous. Okay. Moving on, so Councillor Ridley.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say I'm very grateful to the Chair, Mr Gill and Councillor Loydall for answering my question. I think very clear the consequences if we decided to go and get planning advice on this one. We lose our powers, effectively lose our powers to impose conditions. So that was my question and it's been answered. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Bolter.
Thank you. Yes, can I ask a few bits on the report which don't make sense to me? On page 12, is it what? The site is 26 metres. And 3 paragraphs down, it says it's 16 metres. How far away is it? There's a big difference between 26 metres and 6 metres.
Could you answer that, please?
That's the first bit. Page 12.
Yes, 26 metres is the distance from the facade, so the edge of the building.
Yeah.
16 metres then is the residential boundary to the fence.
Okay, that doesn't seem very... Right, okay, it's
Sorry,
fine.
perhaps I could have expressed that better, so apologies.
Yes, okay. So that's the first bit. I'm not really concerned about the cost. That's not a planning consideration. So that shouldn't be in the equation at all. That's their problem if they can't do it within the costing. That's not a planning consideration. The location is. Now, in an ideal world, it won't be put here. I don't know why it can't be put the other side the building where it said it's stepped. We're talking about a fixture that the levels could be made. So I don't see why that's not a place where it could go. If the officers can answer that one.
Andrew?
Yes, so I will get up the viability report. And I can read what they put. So this is within the existing yard, which has a stepped level change and is required for access to the existing yard and for servicing the school. The route for pipework back to the plant room would be difficult as it will be through the existing building. This is not practical and would cause significant disruption to the school and cost to the project. Notwithstanding this, the area is considered too small for the size of the plant, its enclosure and space around it for access and maintenance.
Councillor Bolter?
Okay. If this was to go ahead and there was a problem, Mr Gill's already said it could be classed either, with your condition on, it could be done through planning enforcement or it could be statutory nuisance depending on which route you want to take. But how is it going to be monitored? Who's going to monitor the noise?
Mr Gill?
Thank you. Well, obviously, the first thing is we need to have a complaint, and once we have a complaint, then officers will attend. Officers do have noise measuring equipment, and they will measure at the boundary, and they can do it unannounced. They can measure from the complainant's gardens, they can measure from the school side. So there is a robust measure. I mean, I think members may recall some years ago, we had a considerable issue of a similar nature at Parklands, where we had a complainant complaining about the noise on the boundary from the function room. Yes. And that's exactly how we dealt with it in terms of noise measurements that were done by Parklands, unannounced visits by environmental health officers at all times of day and night. And the reality of it is, or was, that there was no problem. So, you know, there are measures there that we can put in place. There are ways of dealing with it. And ultimately, if the residents believe that it is a statutory nuisance and we don't, under the Environmental Protection Act, they can take their own action in the magistrates' court against the school. So there's another option there as well.
Okay, all right. I don't know about these things, but I always was told that these new forms of heating need to be enter in a very controlled building. The energy efficiency of the building must be very high for it to actually be any effective. Knowing these schools, the insulation is very low, so I can't imagine this is going to work. So that's not our problem, I know, but we've then stuck with something that may be a problem. But it's not, we're not there yet, I know, but I can't see it happening. Okay. I can't find a reason to refuse it. I've looked very hard and I can't find a planning reason to refuse it. Which annoys me, to be honest. Because I don't think it's right that we should even put it this close to residential properties. I mean, bearing in mind that I think the bedrooms of these bungalows are at the back. And in the summer, you're going to have the windows open when you go to bed. You say you're able to hear this plant. I've got my doubts about that, but the experts say you won't be able to hear it. And the roof is open. Right. So we've got sealed doors with an open roof. I can't quite see the point of that.
It's required to draw the air in. They work by drawing air in
Yes,
and taking the ambient heat out of the air.
yes, I know the principle, Chair, but why have we got seals on the door when the roof's open? I can't.
To prevent noise going sideways, it can only go up. I could explain the technical details of these things, but I'd bore you to death.
Yes. Right, okay. I'll leave somebody else to carry on with then.
We don't have any more speakers.
Move the motion be put, Chair.
Are you saying that you second Councillor Lloyd's
Yes.
motion?
So that's, so just to avoid any doubt whatsoever, that's the recommendation of the officer plus the additional condition that the chair proposed. Everybody happy on that? So, yeah.
Councillor Ridley?
Just to clarify, we're adding the note to the applicant's piece as well.
Yes.
That will all be put in the actual written minutes of the meeting. Because your comment earlier on about things getting lost, that's being revised.
It's an additional condition.
Okay, so it's been moved by Councillor Lloydall to permit, seconded by Councillor Kaufman. All those in favour of permit? 4. Any against? Any abstentions? 2. The application is permitted. That, I believe, ends the meeting tonight. So thank you very much. And have a nice rest of the evening.
Just, Chair, before we depart, as Mrs Lloyd has no longer been on the planning committee, after somewhat, I think nearly 30 years, she'll be sadly missed by all members and officers. Her knowledge of planning has grown a lot over the 30 years, and I'd like to have our,
It will be a great loss to us all.
yes.
He's into some
Thank you, Chair.
officials, I've no doubt.
Thank you, Alan. Been a pleasure.